Today's video has been sponsored by our partners at the Sojourn to celebrate the release of the complete Season 1. It contains all 12 episodes, including 3 brand new ones from Volume 4 of this critically acclaimed audio drama, featuring a full voice cast including Martin Roach from The Expanse and Ben Prendergast from God of War Ragnarok and Apex Legends. The season is now available on all the big services including Audible, Spotify, Google Books and Apple Books, and many more. Every episode is also available on the lowest tier of the Patreon linked below, and higher tiers get access to amazing bonus content including the visual dictionary, a ship identification chart by Star Trek Online's Thomas Morone, a hugely detailed ship cross-section poster, and 10 anthology shorts. If you don't know what the Sojourn is, then head over to their YouTube channel for free samples as well as extra lore content and ship breakdowns. The Sojourn, the complete first season, out now. Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm Hujuana and today's video is a look at some of the hero ships of Star Wars, because many of them are in this peculiar spot where they don't make a ton of sense from an in-universe perspective. The Galactic Standard hero ship is typically a small craft with multiple crew and a surprisingly heavy armament. They tend to have some space inside for socializing and whatnot, and more often than not are derived from light freighters. These are all fantastic features to have for a hero ship, as multi-person crews give everybody in a group of adventurers something to do, and the armament lets them take on the big bad guys when the situation calls for it. But these ships aren't really fit for purpose for any other role, let alone being a light freighter. It happens so often it's like the in-universe companies are specifically coming up with hero ships to sell to people, which is a result of this back-asswards requirement where everything seems to have to hit this checklist for Star Wars stories. And it all goes back to the Millennium Falcon. This is where it started, a ship that's very much just there to be cool for the coolest character in the original movies, something it does very well. In its first appearance, it's in use as a smuggling ship, making use of hidden compartments beneath the floors. Because Han Solo operates in dodgy space doing illegal stuff, it makes sense for the ship to have some form of armament, but really it's there because George Lucas wanted to have a scene copying World War II bomber movie footage. Nowhere is this ship ever really freighter-like in any of the original movies. It was just Han's smuggling ship. The light freighter designation showed up later in an inane attempt to justify what kind of ship it was, which just wasn't needed and never really made much sense. This is a problem because the Falcon cast this vast shadow over the rest of the franchise, leading to many things that followed trying to ape it, making their own cool hero ship while using the Falcon as a template, or even just straight up reusing the actual ship, no matter how incredibly contrived its appearance was. Let's take a look at some examples of these hero ships from throughout the years, whether they're from Legends or not, starting with the Moldy Crow from Dark Forces. This was Kyle Katarn's ship, with a unique appearance and it only has 2 crew, but for some reason it's still a light freighter. Next up is the Outrider from Shadows of the Empire, which was meant to deliberately evoke the Falcon mixed in with a B-Wing. Shockingly, this means it ended up being a light freighter, and a bit boring because of that. The Virago is way better. The Atana from X-Wing Alliance is another blatant Falcon-like, and oh look, it's a light freighter! And now we get to the Ebon Hawk from Knights of the Old Republic, with a number of gameplay requirements placed upon it. It's the ship the player character needs to jet around in. It has multiple rooms for multiple people for the player to go talk to them in, and has some weapons for space combat. Its visuals are absolutely a Falcon callback though, we just can't get away from that. The minivan with guns from the Clone Wars is again a light freighter, but at least it isn't a Falclone. The same cannot be said of the XS freighter from the Old Republic MMO, which was explicitly meant to be a Falcon-like, just like many of the other player ships were based on other iconic Star Wars designs. That was sort of the point of the game, to allow the player to embody parts of the franchise. Ghost from Rebels at least tries to have its own shape and stylings, and ends up being on the bigger end of the ships in this archetype, but it is still based on a light freighter with a heavy armament. Not even Andor is free from the Falcon's influence, but at least the Fondor Hallcraft's armament is a hidden modification and only meant to be used in the most dire of circumstances, so maybe it sidesteps the world-building weirdness. That is 8 ships that are similar to the Falcon, 8 ships that are all armed light freighters, and I already know what many of you have been yelling at the screen thinking I'm a complete moron for not considering. Pirates. Freighters and transports need weapons to protect themselves from the dangers of piracy or even war, right? Just like the Action 6, or the BFF-1, or the GR-75, or the AA-9, or the Tailander, or the Starliner. Wait, those are all unarmed? Doesn't that make these ships vulnerable to being attacked? Or is the piracy thing just not actually an issue? All these actual freighters and transports aren't armed, and they're actually meant to transport things. They weren't designed behind the scenes to be hero ships, so they don't have the hero ship armament. These Falcon-like light freighters, being armed to the teeth while existing and operating alongside real transports, highlights how ridiculous the piracy argument is. Or, if widespread piracy actually is a problem, then they just expose an even stupider bit of world building through people refusing to protect themselves unless they're the main character. Taking a step back though, and you can see that it's kind of a tricky position to be in from a behind the scenes perspective. If you want to tell these sort of stories that Star Wars is known for, then that's just the type of ship you need to have. It happens in other franchises too, like the various craft used by the Guardians of the Galaxy that are kind of the same thing. But those ships at least never pretend to be something they're not. They don't masquerade as delivery vans engaging in some sort of next day shipping war. Another example would be the Firefly, a little cargo ship that is completely unarmed, but somehow it still works, and the verse doesn't collapse from this insane concept. Stories can be told on spacecraft in sci-fi without getting into dogfights all the time, but then a lot of people didn't like Andor for basically exactly that reason. The show avoided doing the same old Star Wars stuff, and a lot of people didn't like it. So it's easy to see why these Falcon-likes just keep happening. And really, there's nothing inherently wrong with that idea. There's nothing inherently bad about a hero ship that a crew of people use to go around getting into dogfights and having adventures in. I got a bit off track, but the problem I'm talking about is when they use this bizarre light freighter euphemism which pokes this odd hole in the world building. It's this strange behind-the-scenes element that's managed to seep its way into the in-universe lore in an absurd manner. It's like ship construction companies are trying to make bank off the hordes of adventurers that apparently fill up the galaxy, constantly buying these ships. It's made especially bad because there's other really good hero ships in Star Wars that fit this archetype exactly, but don't stumble into being derived from light freighters. The Razor Crest, for example, was an assault ship. Boba's Fire Spray was a patrol and attack craft. The Mandalorian Gauntlets are all warships. The Mantis is a yacht. They don't fall into this peculiar world-building pit that has opened up in the setting caused by the massive weight of the Millennium Falcon's popularity. They fall into other types of pits, ones full of monsters. So the lore around these ships is awkward, but is there a way to actually justify gunships pretending to be light freighters? Sure there is. We can use some inspiration from our ship classification video and say it's a deliberate obfuscation of what these ships are. The shipyards know they aren't making freighters. They know they're making gunships and heavy fighters, they just package them as something more palatable in order to make bank off the unstable parts of the galaxy. Maybe they do it in order to make the galaxy more dangerous, in order to sell even more gunships to people, which neatly ties into the arms dealer casino planet horse racing stuff that happened in The Last Jedi. If you want to take it another way, maybe it could be a way to make things more difficult for a presiding government at the time, perhaps to arm a rebellion of some kind. Though I'm not sure the Empire would let them get away with that one though. No matter the reason for all the Millennium Falclones to exist, they can't help but end up feeling a bit peculiar in the context of the greater world that they're a part of. This is mainly down to the flimsy light freighter categorization they all got lumped under, which thankfully has become a less common world building crutch in recent years. Thanks for watching! Don't forget to check out The Sojourn, the complete first season, and the extra content on their YouTube channel and Patreon. Links are below in the description and pinned comment. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.